The apartment was too quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears. Dr. Naomi Pierce sat at her kitchen counter, a half-eaten salad beside her laptop, the glow of the screen painting her face in pale blue. She told herself she liked the silence. It helped her think. But even she didn't believe that anymore. The city lights outside looked like static, 1,000 windows flickering with other people's lives. Inside hers, only the coffee machine spoke, groaning every few minutes like an old friend trying to stay awake. Naomi checked the clock. 11:47 p.m. She should have gone to bed hours ago, but the last patient file of the day still blinked open on her screen. She rubbed her eyes, typed a note, then leaned back, letting the cursor blink in rhythm with her pulse. A life spent fixing other people's minds. And yet, here she was, whispering to an empty apartment, just one more report. The machine pinged. A new notification appeared at the corner of the screen. New session uploaded. Patient ID 4127, Marcus Pierce. She froze. The coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. Marcus Pierce, her son. The name she hadn't said out loud in 15 years. Her first thought was that it was some kind of system glitch. Her second, one she didn't want to admit, was that maybe, just maybe, she was dreaming. She clicked the alert. The system confirmed. Session recorded today at 3:15 p.m. Her stomach tightened. That was impossible. She'd been in session all afternoon. She'd even had lunch with a colleague at that exact time. There had to be a mix-up. Some intern uploading mislabeled data, some client using a fake name. But still, her hand trembled as she hovered over the file. Click. At first, only static, a soft crackle like the start of an old cassette tape. Then a boy's voice, clear, steady, and impossibly familiar. My mom used to be a doctor. She helps people. I think she forgot how to help herself. Naomi's heart stopped. She pressed pause. Then, play again. Then again, as if repetition could make it less real. The voice sounded no older than 13. The way he pronounced doctor, the soft drag on the R. It was exactly how Marcus used to say it when he was little. She sat still for a long time, staring at the monitor. Her reflection floated over the waveform on the screen. Gray hair pulled into a neat bun, dark circles beneath sharp eyes, the expression of someone who'd built walls so high she'd forgotten what they were protecting. She whispered, barely breathing, "Who are you?" Outside, rain began to fall. Light, hesitant drops against glass. Inside, she rewound the clip and listened again. My mom used to be a doctor. The tone was calm, almost proud, but the next line carried something else, something raw. I think she forgot how to help herself. It landed like a diagnosis she'd spent her whole career avoiding. Naomi closed the laptop. The room instantly felt colder. She poured herself another cup of coffee, even though it was nearly midnight. The bitterness grounded her, but only for a second. Then came the questions. Who was this boy? How did he know Marcus's name? And why did his voice sound like someone she'd once loved beyond words? She tried to reason it out. Maybe the university's database recycled old IDs. Maybe it was some kind of sick prank. But even as she thought it, she knew better. She'd spent her life decoding voices, parsing pain from tone alone, and this voice wasn't random. It was meant for her. She reopened the file. The system log flickered. No sender, no device ID, no traceable IP, just a timestamp. Today, 3:15 p.m., she whispered. 15 years gone, and you still find a way to reach me? Her hand shook as she pressed play again. The boy's voice continued, quieter this time, almost like a secret. Sometimes she talks about him, even though she says she doesn't remember. She keeps his picture next to her bed. Naomi felt the breath leave her body. The sentence was too specific. Marcus had a small scar above his right eyebrow, a mark from falling off his bike when he was 9. She used to tease him that it made him look brave. The photo on her desk still showed that tiny scar, frozen forever in the past. For a moment, Naomi forgot how to breathe. She stood up, walked to the window, and stared out into the rain. Her reflection stared back. A woman who dedicated her life to other people's healing while ignoring the hollow echo inside her own chest. The file ended abruptly. No sign-off, no name, just silence. She hit replay one last time, letting the boy's words loop until they blurred into white noise. When she finally closed the laptop, the apartment felt heavier. The coffee machine clicked off. The only sound left was the rain tapping against the window, like soft, unanswered knocks. She whispered into the dark, "Marcus, what are you trying to tell me?" For a long while, there was nothing. Then the screen flickered again, just once. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat, steady, patient, waiting. Naomi stared at it, part fear, part hope. She didn't know what she'd find if she looked deeper. She only knew that something, someone, had just reached across 15 years of silence to remind her of what she'd spent her life teaching others. That closure isn't found by turning the page. Sometimes it's when the page turns back to you. And with that thought, she whispered, "All right, I'm listening." Naomi didn't sleep that night. The boy's voice kept replaying in her head, looping between the rain and the hum of the refrigerator. By morning, logic kicked in. She was a psychologist. Her mind needed evidence, not ghosts. So, she pulled up the server log, tracing the strange session file to its source. A tiny IP address blinked back at her from the corner of the screen. Somewhere out in the suburbs, somewhere real. By noon, she was driving out of the city. Coffee in one hand, doubt in the other. The GPS led her to a quiet street lined with cracked sidewalks and peeling mailboxes. At the end of it stood a small community center, its sign faded by time. Hope Haven, Youth Outreach. Inside, laughter echoed down the halls. Kids were painting, talking, existing in a world that hadn't yet learned to be cynical. Naomi asked the receptionist about the file ID. The woman looked confused, then pointed toward a small recording booth at the back. That's where the kids record stories for their art therapy group. You can talk to Eli. He's the one who runs most of the recordings. Eli. When Naomi saw him, something inside her froze. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, tangled headphones around his neck, his hair too long for his eyes. But it wasn't the hair that caught her. It was the eyes. Gray, piercing. The exact shade Marcus had. "Hey," she said softly, "you're Eli?" He looked up, curious but cautious. "Yeah." "You're not from social services, are you?" "No," Naomi said. "I just heard your recording." His expression changed, guarded now. "My recording? You mean the story about my mom?" "Yes," she whispered. "It somehow showed up in my system." He frowned. "That's weird. Those files are supposed to stay in our local drive." Naomi hesitated, her voice barely holding steady. "Can I ask, how do you know the name Marcus Pierce?" Eli tilted his head, studying her. "You knew him." "I did," Naomi said carefully. "A long time ago." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "My mom said he was a good man." She never met you, though. Naomi felt her throat tighten. Your mom? Her name's Mara Lewis. He said, she's a nurse. Or she was. She's been missing for 5 days. His tone cracked on that last word, but he kept talking. The police say she probably just needed space. But I know my mom. She wouldn't just leave me. For a moment, Naomi couldn't breathe. She looked around at the peeling paint, the cluttered shelves, the small desk covered with craft supplies. And it hit her how out of place she was. A doctor from the city standing in the middle of a boy's collapsing world. Eli, she said gently, how old are you? 14. She stared at him. 14. Marcus had died 15 years ago. Her thoughts spun in quiet panic. Coincidence? It had to be. Still, the resemblance. Do you have a picture of your mom? Eli dug into his backpack and handed her a wrinkled photo. Mara looked tired but kind, her smile faint, her eyes familiar. In the background of the picture was a bookshelf, and on it, a framed photo Naomi recognized instantly. Marcus in his college graduation gown. Naomi's fingers trembled. Where did she get this? Eli shrugged. She said someone mailed it to her after he passed. No return address. Silence stretched between them, long and fragile. Naomi finally said, You said she's missing. Do you know where she might have gone? He shook his head. She worked nights at the clinic across town. Sometimes she'd listen to old records when she couldn't sleep. Said it reminded her of someone she used to love. He paused, eyes glistening. She told me once that people who love deeply don't always get to stay, but they leave pieces of themselves behind. Maybe that's why she kept his picture. Naomi swallowed hard. That single line, people who love deeply don't always get to stay, felt like it had been written for her. They talked for another hour. Eli told her how his mom worked double shifts, how she'd come home smelling of antiseptic and lavender, how she'd hum under her breath when she thought he was asleep. She used to tell me, he said, you don't have to be born into love to deserve it. Naomi felt something stir in her chest, guilt, tenderness, and a question she couldn't yet name. As she stood to leave, Eli called after her. Hey, if you find anything about my mom, will you tell me? She nodded. I promise. Back in her car, Naomi sat for a long time without starting the engine. Her reflection stared back from the windshield. Same tired eyes, same lines etched by years of control. Only now, they looked shaken. Alive. She opened her laptop again, pulling up the metadata of that strange file. Every trace pointed here, this very building, this boy. But there was something else, something hidden deeper in the log. An encrypted signature that read, M. Lewis, Archive, 2009, Mara Lewis. Naomi pressed her palm against her chest, trying to still the pounding. It wasn't just about logic anymore. It was about connection, one she didn't yet understand, but couldn't ignore. She thought of Eli, of his gray eyes and the way he said she never met you. She thought of Marcus, her son, and wondered what secrets time had buried between them. And then she whispered to no one. Maybe it's not a mistake. Maybe it's him leading me back. Outside, the afternoon sun began to fade, bleeding into soft orange light. Naomi started the car and turned onto the empty road, heading toward whatever truth was waiting next. Naomi couldn't shake what she'd heard. The boy's voice, the gray eyes, the photo. Every detail gnawed at her, whispering that this wasn't coincidence. So that night, she did what she always did when she couldn't sleep. She started digging. She ran the session file through 3 old databases, cross-referenced the IP address, and followed a digital trail that ended in a dead link, a domain once owned by a hospital that no longer existed. St. Alder's Rehabilitation Center, closed 15 years ago. The same year, Marcus died. The next morning, Naomi drove out past the city, through miles of mist and silence, until the road turned to gravel. The hospital stood like a skeleton on the hill, its windows boarded up, its sign half buried under weeds. She parked outside, clutching her coat tighter as the wind whipped through the broken entrance. Inside, everything smelled of dust and old antiseptic. The silence wasn't peaceful. It felt haunted. A flashlight beam cut through the dark. A man's voice said, "Ma'am, this area's restricted." Naomi turned. The man was older, his uniform faded, his face half hidden under a cap. "I'm looking for records," she said. "Patient files from before the hospital shut down." He studied her for a moment, the flashlight trembling slightly. Then he said quietly, "You've been here before." Naomi frowned. "I'm sorry. 15 years ago," he continued, "you came asking about your son, Marcus Pierce." The sound of that name in someone else's mouth made her stomach twist. "You remember that?" "Hard to forget," he said. "You looked just like this. Same eyes, same heartbreak." He led her down a long corridor. The floors groaned beneath their feet, dust rising like ghosts. When they reached the old records room, the man unlocked the door with a heavy ring of keys. "Most of the files are water damaged," he warned, "but some survived." Stacks of boxes lined the walls, their labels fading into shades of brown. Naomi moved slowly, scanning each one, and then she saw it. A label written in black marker, M. Lewis. Her pulse quickened. She lifted the box down and opened it. Inside were therapy notes, recordings, and transcripts. The first page was dated April 18, 2009. The name at the top read, "Patient, Mara Lewis." She flipped through the pages, short summaries, each one more personal than the last. Then, on the final page, her hands froze. It was a transcript of a session Mara never sent. "I once loved a man named Marcus Pierce. He didn't know I was pregnant when he died. I didn't tell anyone. People said he came from a family of doctors, that they were good people. I believed them. I just didn't think they'd ever believe in me." Naomi's breath hitched, her vision blurred. The words sank in slowly, painfully. Mara Lewis, the nurse, the missing mother, the boy with gray eyes. Eli. Naomi dropped the papers, clutching the edge of the table. The room felt like it was tilting. For 15 years, she'd lived with the loss of her son. And all along, a piece of him had still been here, breathing, laughing, existing in a world she never knew. Her first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe there were 2 men with that name. But then, she saw a photo slipped between the files. Marcus, in his scrubs, smiling with someone's hand holding his shoulder. A woman's hand. On the back, in fading ink, were the words, "For our little miracle. Someday, you'll understand." Her knees nearly gave out. The old guard reached for her arm, steadying her. "You all right, ma'am?" She nodded faintly. "I found what I came for," she whispered. "I just don't know what to do with it." As she left the building, the wind carried the sound of distant chimes. One of those old hospital bells still hanging from the roof. It rang softly, like a memory trying to speak. On the drive back, Naomi pulled over at a small diner off the highway. She sat at the counter, ordered a coffee she didn't touch, and stared out the window. Outside, A woman helped a stranger who had dropped his groceries. Two people who didn't know each other connected for 10 seconds by kindness. And somehow, that moment cracked something open inside Naomi. She thought about all the people she'd helped over the years. The strangers whose pain she'd treated, the patients whose stories she carried home every night. How many of them, she wondered, had been closer to her heart than she realized? How many times had she reached out to save someone, never knowing they were part of her own story? When she finally got home, Naomi placed the box of files on her kitchen table. She hesitated, then pulled out one of the old cassette tapes from the stack. The label read, Session 12, Hope. She slipped it into a player she hadn't used in years. The tape crackled to life. It was Mara's voice, soft, steady, but tired. Sometimes I think about writing to his mother, Mara said, to tell her he left something good behind. But I don't think she'd want to hear from me. She already lost one life. Why reopen that wound? Naomi covered her mouth, tears spilling silently. You couldn't have been more wrong, she whispered. She let the tape play until the end, until the silence stretched long enough to sound like forgiveness. Then she reached for her phone and opened Eli's contact info from the community center's website. She typed a message, then erased it. Typed again. Deleted it again. Finally, she put the phone down and just sat there. She didn't know what came next. She only knew that she couldn't unknow what she'd found. The truth wasn't hiding anymore. It had simply been waiting for her to be ready. And somewhere deep down, Naomi realized that maybe this wasn't the end of her story with Marcus. Maybe it was the beginning of the one he'd left for her to finish. The call came just after dawn. Naomi was still sitting at her kitchen table, papers and coffee cups scattered around her like debris from a sleepless night. When her phone buzzed, she didn't expect to hear a hospital operator on the other end, especially not from that hospital. Dr. Pierce, the woman said, a patient named Mara Lewis has been admitted. She's in critical condition. Ward 9. Naomi's breath caught. Ward 9. She hadn't walked those halls in years. She didn't even realize she was driving until she saw the familiar brick building rising through the morning fog. The same place she'd once built her entire career. The same place she'd lost her son. Inside, the lights were harsh, sterile. The smell of antiseptic hit her like a memory. She followed the signs down the corridor, her heels clicking too loud in the quiet. When she reached the end, she saw a small figure slumped beside a hospital bed. Eli. His head rested on his arms, his hand clutching his mother's fingers. Naomi froze at the doorway. Mara lay motionless, a web of tubes and monitors surrounding her. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor filled the silence, steady but fragile. A young doctor turned toward Naomi. Are you family? The question hung in the air like a knife. Naomi's lips parted, but no words came out. Family. She wasn't ready to claim that word. After a long pause, she finally said, softly, I'm someone she trusted once. The doctor nodded and stepped away, leaving Naomi and the boy alone. Eli lifted his head. His eyes were red, his voice small. They said she might not wake up, but I know she will. She promised me. He looked at Naomi. You came. You really came. Naomi moved closer, hesitant, like approaching a memory that might break if she touched it. Eli, I didn't know. I didn't know who you really were. He wiped his eyes on his sleeve. She used to tell me stories about a man who wanted to help people. A man who made her believe love could exist, even when life got ugly. I think that man was your son, wasn't he? Naomi couldn't answer. Her throat tightened and tears filled her eyes before she even realized it. The monitors beeped faster. A nurse rushed in, adjusting wires, calling for the doctor. Naomi instinctively stepped forward, but the nurse stopped her. Please, ma'am, give us space. So Naomi stood back, watching as the machines hummed and the team worked to keep Mara alive. Every sound felt like déjà vu. The monitors, the hurried footsteps, the fear clawing its way up her chest. It was the same sound she'd heard the night she lost Marcus. She whispered under her breath, "Not again. Please, not again." Eli turned to her, tears spilling freely now. She said she was going to tell you everything. She said you deserve to know. His voice broke. I think she was waiting for you. Naomi knelt beside him, resting a trembling hand on his shoulder. I'm here now, she said. I'm not going anywhere. The boy clung to her, his body shaking. You think she can hear us? Yes, Naomi whispered. Sometimes the soul listens before the body does. The nurse adjusted the IV and left them alone again. The room dimmed as a cloud passed over the window, casting everything in pale blue light. Naomi sat beside the bed, studying Mara's face. The fine lines, the familiar shape of her nose, the quiet strength even in stillness. She reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from Mara's forehead. You carried a part of my son all these years, she said, softly. You raised him in ways I never got to. I don't even know how to thank you for that. Eli's small hand slid into hers. She would have liked you, he said. Naomi smiled through her tears. I wish I'd met her sooner. At the doorway, a young nurse lingered, watching them. She whispered to the doctor beside her. You don't see this every day. Maybe not everyone gets a chance to meet what they've lost. The doctor just nodded quietly. The heart monitor steadied, the beeps softened, slow but strong. The crisis passed, for now. Naomi exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath. She stood up, glancing at Eli, who was still gripping his mother's hand. You should rest, she said gently. He shook his head. If I sleep, I might miss when she wakes up. Naomi sat back down beside him. Then I'll stay too, she said. We'll wait together. The room was silent except for the rhythmic hum of machines. And for the first time in years, Naomi didn't feel alone. She watched the faint rise and fall of Mara's chest and thought about all the walls she'd built to keep the world out. Walls that were now quietly falling. Somewhere deep inside, a part of her began to forgive herself. For the years of distance, for the things unsaid, for the love she thought had died with her son. The nurse dimmed the lights for the night, leaving just the soft glow of the monitors. Naomi looked at Eli, who was now half asleep, still holding his mother's hand. She whispered to the still air, almost like a prayer. Maybe this is what healing looks like. Not fixing the past, but finally being brave enough to face it. And as the monitor's beeps blended into the rhythm of breathing, Naomi closed her eyes too. For the first time in 15 years, she felt peace. Raw, imperfect, and real. That night, the hospital lights dimmed one by one until the corridors looked like a maze of fading ghosts. Naomi sat beside Mara's bed, her hands folded, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor filling the silence. Eli had finally fallen asleep in the waiting chair, his head resting on a blanket. Naomi's eyes drifted toward the computer on the side table, Mara's old laptop, now part of the hospital's evidence inventory. Something pulled at her. Maybe instinct, maybe guilt. She reached for it, opened the lid, and watched as the screen flickered to life. There were dozens of files, but one stood out, a draft email, unsent. The subject line read, "To Naomi Pierce." Her breath caught. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad before she clicked. Dr. Pierce, I know you probably don't remember me. We met years ago at St. Alder's. You treated me after Marcus died. I was one of your quiet patients, the one who always brought tea instead of tears. You once told me grief was love with nowhere to go. I think you were right. But I never blamed you. I just wanted my son to know where he came from. Naomi's eyes blurred as she read the words again and again, her chest tightening with every line. Her hand covered her mouth. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I didn't know how. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I thought you'd hate me for keeping a piece of him you never knew existed. But Eli deserves to know love wasn't a mistake. It was a beginning. Her tears fell before she could stop them. She scrolled down, but the email ended there. Unfinished. Unsent. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat that never got the chance to speak. Then Naomi noticed the timestamp. 15 years ago, the exact week Marcus had died. She sat back, shaking. How could this have stayed buried all these years? She looked through the folder properties. And then she saw it. The name of the person who'd accessed the draft. A. Linwood, her old assistant. The realization hit her like a wave. Linwood had been in charge of all outgoing patient correspondence back then, screening messages, managing her caseload, protecting her from emotional strain. Naomi remembered how efficient he'd been, how he always said, "You have a reputation to uphold, doctor. Boundaries matter." Her voice trembled in the empty room. You erased her voice. She leaned back in the chair, half laughing, half crying. So, that's why people think psychologists don't need therapy. The words slipped out bitterly, but somehow it felt good to say them. She turned the screen toward herself again, whispering to the woman who'd written those words. "You tried to reach me, and I never heard you." The nurse from earlier walked in quietly, holding a chart. "Dr. Pierce, are you all right?" Naomi wiped her face and nodded. "I found something. Something I should have seen 15 years ago." The nurse looked at the sleeping boy by the window and lowered her voice. She loved him so much. Every shift, she'd talk about making things better. Said she just needed time. Naomi smiled faintly through her tears. She was stronger than anyone gave her credit for. She closed the laptop gently and placed her hand over Mara's. Her fingers were cold but steady. "You did everything right," Naomi whispered. "You loved him, and you loved him. You gave life another chance when I didn't know how. The truth wasn't cruel anymore. It was humbling." She sat there in silence for a long while, staring at the woman who had carried the piece of her son that life had hidden from her. The monitors beeped softly, like a rhythm, syncing with her own heartbeat. For years, Naomi had believed grief was something to be managed, categorized, explained. But sitting there now, surrounded by the quiet hum of machines and the faint scent of antiseptic and lavender, she realized she'd never truly faced it. She hadn't healed. She'd just intellectualized the pain until it was polite enough to live with. She looked at Eli, still asleep, his small hands curled around his jacket. The same hands Marcus had. The same stubborn quiet. And suddenly, everything made sense. The mysterious file, the voice recording, the timing, the message that shouldn't exist. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't an accident. It was life finding its way back to her through a forgotten email, through a boy who refused to stop believing in his mother. Naomi exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping her lips. "You really are your father's son," she whispered to Eli, persistent to the end. Her phone buzzed, a text from the head nurse. "We can transfer the patient to a private room if you'd like. You're listed as next of kin. Next of kin." The words looked foreign on the screen. She stared at them for a moment, then typed back, "Yes, please do." She turned off the laptop, placed it beside Mara's pillow, and whispered, "You reached me, Mara. Your message found me." Outside the window, the first hint of dawn colored the sky in soft orange. The hallway lights flickered to life one by one. And for the first time in years, Naomi didn't dread the morning. She stood, stretched her stiff shoulders, and let out a long, trembling breath. "I spent half my life helping people make peace with their past," she murmured. "Maybe this is how mine finally forgives me back." Then, looking down at Mara, she smiled. Not the practiced, professional smile she'd worn for decades, but something raw, almost childlike. "Thank you for saving my son," she whispered, "and for saving what was left of me." The beeping monitor kept steady rhythm as sunlight spilled through the blinds, bathing the room in gold. Naomi didn't move for a long time. She just stood there, one hand over Mara's, the other resting gently on the boy's shoulder. And in that fragile stillness, she felt something shift. Not just in the room, but in herself. Not everything lost stays gone. Some things wait. Some truths circle back. When you're finally ready to listen. The next morning, the first light poured through the hospital window, soft and pale, touching everything in gold. Naomi had spent the whole night in that chair beside Mara's bed, her hand still resting on Mara's wrist, feeling the faint pulse beneath her skin. She hadn't prayed in years, but through the quiet hours, she found herself whispering things that sounded a lot like prayers. A small sound broke the silence, a low breath, a stir. Naomi looked up. Mara's fingers moved. The monitor beeped faster. Naomi leaned forward, holding her breath as if one wrong move might shatter the fragile moment. Then, slowly, Mara's eyes fluttered open. "Mara," Naomi whispered, her voice trembling. Mara blinked, confused, her gaze darting around before settling on Naomi's face. For a second, she just stared, trying to make sense of the person sitting beside her. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "You're real." Naomi smiled through tears. "I'm here." Mara's lips trembled. "I told him." "He was loved," she said softly, her voice hoarse from the ventilator. "I just didn't know how to tell you." The words hit Naomi harder than any truth she'd uncovered. Her throat tightened. "You don't have to," she said, gripping Mara's hand. "You just did." Outside the glass door, Eli stood frozen, his wide eyes glistening. When Naomi nodded, he rushed in, almost tripping over his own feet. "Mom?" he whispered. Mara turned her head weakly, a small smile breaking through. "Hey, baby." Eli grabbed her hand, pressing it to his cheek. "You're awake," he said, his voice cracking. "I promised you I would be," she whispered. The three of them stayed like that. No words, no explanations, just the sound of heartbeats sinking in the small sterile room. Then, from the bedside table, Naomi's phone buzzed. She ignored it. Instead, her eyes caught something else. The old hospital recorder that had captured Mara's forgotten sessions. The same one that had started everything. Without thinking, Naomi pressed play. The faint hum of static filled the air, followed by the boy's voice again, younger, unsure. My mom used to be a doctor. She helps people. I think she forgot how to help herself. The room went still. Mara closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. Naomi reached out, wiping it away, before she even realized she was crying too. Then Naomi said, almost to herself, "He was right, you know." Mara's voice shook. "I thought if I helped everyone else, it would make the pain quieter, but it never did." Naomi nodded, her voice low. "That's how I lived for 15 years, teaching people how to let go while I kept holding on." The tape clicked off. Silence filled the space again, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was gentle, almost peaceful. Eli looked between them, his young face full of something far older, understanding. "Maybe it's not about forgetting," he said softly. "Maybe it's about remembering, just enough to start over." Naomi smiled, brushing his hair back. "You're smarter than both of us." He grinned through his tears. "I learned from 2 doctors." For the first time in years, Naomi laughed. A real laugh, raw and free. The sound surprised her. Mara laughed too, weak but sincere. It felt like sunlight cracking through a storm that had lasted too long. The nurse peeked in, saw the scene, and quietly closed the door to give them privacy. Naomi looked at Mara again. "When Marcus died, I stopped believing in signs. I thought the universe had gone quiet. But now I think—" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Maybe it never stopped talking. Maybe I just stopped listening." Mara squeezed her hand. "You heard me now." Naomi nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I remembered how to help myself." Outside, the sky had turned white with morning light. The hospital hallway buzzed with life again. Nurses chatting, carts rolling, the smell of coffee drifting in. But inside that room, time moved slower. Naomi sat back, her hand still clasped in Mara's. She looked at Eli and said, "You know, I used to tell my patients that forgiveness is for the strong, but I think I got it wrong." Eli tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "It's not about being strong," Naomi said. "It's about being honest, about saying, I was hurt, but I don't want to carry it anymore. That's what makes people free." Mara smiled faintly. "Then maybe we're free now." Naomi looked at her, then at Eli. "Yeah," she whispered. "Maybe we are." The sunlight through the blinds painted stripes of gold across the room. It fell on Mara's face, on Eli's small hands, on Naomi's tear-streaked smile. Somewhere, deep inside Naomi's mind, she heard the echo of the very first line that started it all, that boy's quiet voice through the recording. Maybe she just forgot how to help herself. And now, with a small, peaceful smile, she whispered back to that memory. I remembered now. The camera would linger there, 3 lives connected by love, pain, and truth. As Naomi's voice, now calm and full, carried over the final image, "If this story touched you, call someone you love today." Her tone softens, almost breaking. Don't wait for the right moment. Just call. Because sometimes the only thing between losing someone and finding them again is one simple message. 3 years later, the world looked softer somehow. The air outside Naomi's small classroom smelled of rain and pine. Inside, the walls were lined with handwritten notes and drawings, messages from kids who'd found a place to belong. Naomi stood at the front, her silver hair tied back loosely, watching as a group of teenagers scribbled stories about people they missed. Eli stood beside her, taller now, his voice deeper, his presence calm. He was reading a letter out loud, the same one his mother had written years ago. "Blood connects us by birth," he said, his tone steady but full of warmth. "But love makes us a family." The students listened quietly. A few wiped their eyes. Naomi smiled. Those words never got old. When class ended, Eli helped stack the chairs. "They remind me of me," he said softly. "All those kids, trying to make sense of what they've lost." Naomi looked at him. "You're helping them do exactly that," she said. "That's more than most adults can say." He shrugged, a shy smile forming. "Guess I had good teachers." Naomi chuckled, handing him a small velvet pouch. "I've been holding on to something that belongs to you." He opened it carefully. Inside was a silver necklace, simple but elegant. The pendant had one engraved line: "Truth always finds its way home." Eli ran his thumb across the words. "It's his, isn't it?" "It was," Naomi said. "Now it's yours. It should stay in the family, wherever that word decides to live." Eli nodded, emotion catching in his throat. "I think Mom would have liked that. She'd be proud of who you've become," Naomi said, "of who we've all become." They stood in silence for a moment, sunlight spilling through the dusty window, the golden hour wrapping everything in a kind of quiet grace. Eli turned toward her. "Do you ever think about that day? When you found the file?" Naomi smiled faintly. "Every time I turn on my computer," she said. "But I don't see it as a mistake anymore. It was an invitation to start living again." He grinned. "To listen when life talks?" She laughed softly. "Exactly that." Outside, the rain had stopped. The students waved goodbye as they left, their laughter echoing down the hallway. Naomi leaned against the doorframe, watching them go. "You know," she said quietly, "for years I told people the truth is what sets you free. I just never realized it might also bring you home." Eli looked at her, eyes glinting with that familiar gray that once belonged to Marcus. "You found your way back, Grandma." Naomi took a slow breath, her heart swelling. "No," she said, smiling. "We did." The camera lingered as the two of them stepped outside, walking past the old wooden sign that read, "The Haven, a free space for healing hearts." The evening light wrapped them in soft amber, the kind that feels like forgiveness. As they reached the end of the path, Naomi looked straight ahead, not at Eli, not at the horizon, but at the world that had once felt too heavy to carry. Her voice, calm and gentle, came in over the fading image. "If you ever get a message that shouldn't exist," she said, her tone full of quiet wonder, "maybe it's not a mistake. Maybe it's life giving you a second chance." The shot lingered on the necklace in Eli's hand, catching the reflection of the sunset. Truth always finds its way home. And as the music swelled softly in the background, Naomi's voice whispered one last line, the kind that makes you stop, just for a moment, and breathe. Sometimes, the things we think are lost are just waiting for us to be ready to find them. If you're still here, still listening, take a second. Think of the person you haven't called in too long, the one whose name sits in your phone or in your memory, waiting for a reason. Maybe this is it, because sometimes the hardest part isn't saying goodbye. It's realizing you still can say hello. Call them, text them, tell them something simple. "I was thinking about you. I miss you. Thank you." You'd be amazed how much those words can heal, even years later. We don't get to rewrite the past, but every day, we get a small chance to make peace with it. And maybe that's all life really asks of us, to notice the chances it keeps giving. So, before this video fades, before your next notification pulls you somewhere else? Stop for just one breath. Let your heart remember the voice, the face, the love that once felt like home. Tag someone you'd call if you had one more chance. Tell them what you never said before. And if you can't call, whisper it anyway. The heart has a way of hearing what the world can't. Because this story, Naomi's, Eli's, Mara's, isn't about miracles. It's about moments, about choosing to open the message you thought wasn't meant for you, and finding out it was always yours. Some messages don't get lost. They wait. Some doors don't close. They just need the right knock. And some loves, no matter how far they travel, always find their way home. Based on countless true stories of people who found their way back home,